Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here and welcome to video number 5 in our men's shirt upcycling series. Now all of the upcycles that we've done so far included some sort of sleeve or a version of a sleeve. So today I thought, why don't we go in the opposite direction and do a sleeveless upcycle. Here you can see a quick before and after, so that way we have a clear idea of which direction we're going with our sleeveless upcycle. And sometimes it might seem that skipping the sleeve might be the easiest way to go about it, and it's a yes and a no because there are a couple of very specific moments that we have to take care of in order for your sleeveless upcycle to turn out really good and comfortable. First, let's take a look at the shirt that we're working with. I usually use my husband's old shirts, but this one I did thrift from our local thrift store, and as you can see it is quite large on me, but I did love the pattern and the color, so I decided to go for it. But for this particular upcycle, you don't necessarily have to go many sizes up in order to be able to make it. So definitely take a look at what you have in your upcycling pile or perhaps in your wardrobe, things that you don't wear, and take it from there. If I button up the collar, you can see that it actually fits quite decently. It is a little bit bigger than I would like it to be, but it's not super big, so perhaps I'm going to leave it as is. But in your case, if you want to rework the collar, or if you want to rework the positioning of the button placket, so to make it in reverse like it would be on lady shirts, then we have gone over that in the previous tutorials, so take a look at them. I will leave them linked in the description of this video. So, our main goal for today is to rework the shoulder and the sleeve area as well as the underarm area, and that's what I'm going to start with by cutting away the sleeve and opening up the side seam. Now, if you're working with a shirt that is quite larger than your own size, then of course you can take a gamble, you can use scissors and just cut everything apart so that way you can speed up the process. But if you are working with a shirt that is just a size bigger, or maybe it is your size shirt, then I would definitely take my time, undo the seams very carefully, because every quarter of an inch, every millimeter counts in order to save that fabric for redesign. And even if you end up cutting some of that away, it's always better to be safe than sorry. Also, here's something extra to keep in mind. If you are working with a shirt that is your size or perhaps close to your size, then leave the side seams intact for right now, because you might not need to do any adjustments to them. You know, there's something interesting about this shirt. It actually doesn't have a bust pocket, which definitely works out in my favor because then I don't have to worry about it. But if you do have a bust pocket, you might need to undo it and take it off in the process. So definitely keep your eye out on that. Right now, I'm going to put this on and we're going to pin the side seams. One side is going to be pinned right now along the original seam, and the other one we will pin and adjust on the body. When you're pinning your shirt on yourself, you might find that your side seams don't match exactly, and that's okay as long as the fit is good. We also want to make sure that the garment is not too tight and you don't take in too much on the sides, because that will cause stress wrinkles. In the underarm section, you want to pin close enough to the body to avoid gaping of the armhole, and you want to pin high enough so that way your undergarments don't show during the wear of your top. Now I'm going to copy these markings on the other side seam. After that, I'm going to baste these right sides together so that way all the extra fabric is on the inside of the garment. And I'm going to try it on one more time to see how the fit looks. And it's not going to give me a 100% accurate picture because the extra fabric is going to be flopping on the inside, giving a little bit of extra volume at the side seams, but it will be close enough, and from there I can judge if this is great or perhaps I need to adjust the side seam a little bit more. Once I'm done with basting on both sides, I'm going to turn my project right side out and try it on. Overall, I think it's pretty good, and as I'm trying this on, I'm looking for any obvious drag lines, anything that I need to pay attention to. For example, in the back, I do have a little bit of bagging of the fabric, but that can be easily remedied by adding some darts. But other than that, the side seam is looking good, so I think we can move on to the next step, which is going to be marking the armhole. First, I'm going to start by marking where is my bra strap, so that way the armhole goes over it. Now I'm feeling it with my finger and then marking it with heat erasable pen. Now please disregard the other marking that you see. I did make it earlier and it is not correct. I'm going to mark the curve of the front armhole in a similar way, following the outlines of the bra. The line itself doesn't have to be perfect since we will be adjusting it a little bit later. And remember that you can get the armhole curve in at least 3 other different ways. 1, by using an existing garment and then copying that. 2, by using a sewing pattern. And 3, by drafting a new armhole. And all of these methods we've discussed in detail on the channel, so definitely take a look. I have taken the shirt off and now we'll tidy up the armhole. The final result should be a nice smooth curve. Next, I will cut through the front only, leaving about ½ an inch from the line. This will give me not only the seam allowance, but also a little margin for error. The next step after that is to mark the back armhole. In my case, I have a little pleat, but I will be cutting that away, so it shouldn't be a problem. Now the back armhole's curve usually is less pronounced and straighter than the front since it goes over the shoulder blades, so I am marking it right on the garment. This time I will be cutting right on the marked line since it already includes both the margin for error and my seam allowance. Of course, I will need to try it on one more time, and with all of the extra fabric cut away, you might experience bagging underneath the armpit. If you have a large bust, you can remedy that by making a dart. If you have a smaller bust, you can take in more in the underarm section, like I am doing on your screens. Don't forget to pin it or to mark it so that way we know how much we have to take in. Now it is time to make the final markings on the underarm section and the side seam. Here we're going to mark the new placement. I'm going to turn it wrong side out and I'm going to blend in this new marking into the side seam. Now I did baste this little part, the new marking, and tried it on one more time just to make sure that everything really does fit how I want it. Now it is time to cut, and as always I'm going to be cutting away from the marking line, in this case 3/8 of an inch, which is going to be the width of my seam allowance. Currently, one side seam and one armhole is all done and ready to go, so now I'm going to neatly fold my garment in half and copy all of that on the other side, and then of course cut it out. I'm going to bring the side seams together like so and double check the shape of the underarm section of the sleeve over here. And if it is forming a really sharp corner, we want to widen it just by a tiny bit to make this a really nice smooth curve, almost like an oval. Next, we're going to be working on finishing the armhole and the side seams. This area right over here is prone to stretching out, especially if you're going to be handling it quite a bit. So if in doubt, you can apply a really narrow strip of interfacing on the insides of the garment or stay stitching right on the edge of the armhole. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the side seams. So I'm going to place right sides together. So this is the right side of the back. I'm going to place it with the right side down of the front, like so. And we're going to start by stitching it with a straight stitch 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. When doing any seams in this project, don't forget to start and end with backstitching. Once the seam is done, we will need to finish the raw edges of the fabric. You can do that on a serger if you have one, or you can do that with a tightly spaced zigzag stitch or an overcast stitch on your sewing machine like I am doing in this case. Once done, we will repeat all of the same steps on the other side seam as well. In between steps, give your finished seams a good press. Not only it will lead to a nice and crisp result, but also will make your sewing a little bit easier and smoother. Now onto the hem. You can leave the hem as is, but in my case, I want to shorten it. I have tried it on and made a mark of how short I want it to be. Next, I'm going to take this garment, fold it in half, straighten it out, and place it on my table. First, I'm going to make a straight line across perpendicular to the center front, like this. And I'm going to do exactly the same, but this time straight line is going to come from the center back. Now I'm going to repeat the curves of the original hem. Now I'm going to cut it out, as always stepping away, in this case about ½ an inch for a hem. The hem is going to be finished with a narrow double fold technique, folding each time about ½ an inch and then stitching it down with a straight stitch. I have a very detailed video on how to do this hem very neatly, so I will leave it for you guys in the description of this video. Of course, give your hem a really nice press, and then let's get on to one of the last steps, which is going to be finishing the armhole. Here we have a couple of options. Option number 1, you can make a facing, but for that you have to draft an extra pattern piece, or you can finish it with a bias tape. I will go with the bias tape option, for which we will need to cut 2 narrow strips of fabric at a 45-degree angle, which gives them a little bit of flexibility and helps mold them to the curve. Each one of these is about 1 inch wide, and the total length is a little bit longer than the circumference of the armhole. Now I have cut these from white cotton poplin so that way you can see a little bit better, but if I were you, I would use the sleeve that we cut off in order to cut it from the matching fabric. That way it will be nearly invisible. A quick note about this armhole: as you can see, I decided not to cut away more, so it was a good thing that I gave myself a margin of error. Now let's take one of these, and we're going to start a little bit away from the side seam, place it like so, and fold it up like this. You can pin it in place to hold it, and now let's head to the sewing machine to stitch it down all the way around with ½ an inch seam allowance. When you do this, go slow and steady. Don't stretch the bias tape, but instead gently mold it to the curve of the armhole. When you get to the bottom, snip off the extra, so that way they overlap just by a tiny bit, and then continue stitching. Now we're going to take this bias tape, fold it like so, with the seam allowance facing this way, and we're going to understitch it. We're going to stitch pretty close to the edge all the way around. Here you see how it looks when it's been completed. After that, we will fold the bias tape over the seam allowance, then fold the entire seam allowance down and stitch one more time right on the edge. At this point, your finished armhole is going to look like this. Don't forget to give it a really good press as a final touch. The very last step for me is to address the bagginess in the back. For that, I'm going to pinch in the excess fabric and mark that point. From whatever fabric is left, I will cut out 2 strips of fabric, each about 1.25 inches wide, and I will turn them into ties. You can leave one end of your ties unfinished because it won't be visible. Next, I'm going to make sure that the marks on the back are even and parallel. Then I will take a strap, I will place the unfinished end between my fingers and then pinch it in. And to secure it, I will stitch over it from the inside. When both ties are done, you will have a really neat alternative to darts. And if you do want to do darts, then of course you will find instructions in the previous videos. After all of that, now let's take a look at the final result. Now I must say that I could have scooped out the armhole in these areas even more, but I actually don't really wear sleeveless tops that often. I think for obvious reasons. I have sensitive skin on my shoulders. I always have this really awkward tan. So I'm going to be adding sleeve onto this later on. But right now, as a sleeveless top, I think it turned out pretty well. Upcycling is definitely a really useful skill on so many levels, and I would love to encourage you to explore it even more. So take a look at this video right over here to see how you can upcycle your blankets into new, practical and useful clothes. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy, thoughtful upcycling. I'll see you soon. Bye!